Welcome to the 2021 ALA Midwinter Presidential Candidates Forum. My name is Wanda K. Brown. I am the ALA immediate past president, and I will be moderating the forum. Also, with me is Ellie Mina, ALA parliamentarian, who will serve as the official timekeeper. For today's forum, the floor will be open for questions from the attendees. Members were also provided the opportunity to submit questions prior to today's forum. There are two methods to formally ask the question or make a comment. You may either type your question or comment in the Q&A box, which will be read by ALA staff, or you may raise your hand, which is at the bottom of the screen. We will recognize you and unmute you so that you may verbally share your question or comment. Attendees will always be virtually muted other than when recognized. To identify yourself, please state your name, your affiliation, and your question or comment. The chat feature will not be available. For optimal viewing, we encourage you to set up your Zoom view to speaker view, which can be located on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Closed captioning is available at the bottom of your screen. For the forum today, we have asked each candidate to give a 5-minute opening statement, which will be timed by our parliamentarian. After the candidates have given their presentations, the floor will be open for questions from the audience. All respective candidates will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. The forum will end with each candidate presenting a 2-minute closing statement or summary. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the candidates for the 2022-2023 presidency of the American Library Association. Please note that the following presentation order was determined by lot. First, we have Ed Garsha, Director of the Cranston Public Library, Rhode Island. Next, we have Stacy Aldrich, State Librarian from Hawaii State Public Library System in Honolulu. And then we have Lessa Kanuiapua Pelea Lozada, Adult Services Assistant Manager at the Palos Verdes Library in California. I will now ask presidential candidate Ed Garsha to present his opening statement. Ed?
Thank you, Madam Past President, and thank you for your service to ALA. It's been a pleasure working with you these past 3 years on the executive board. I also want to thank my colleagues, Lessa and Stacy, for their commitment to the organization by running for president. Standing for election to be your ALA president has been one of the highest honors of my life. A journey that began 15 years ago when I switched careers to become a librarian has led me to this point. Before becoming a librarian, I worked in the music business at Sony Music and in nonprofits at the American Diabetes Association. I received a diversity fellowship while earning my MLIS at the University of Rhode Island, which enabled me to attend conferences and become involved in ALA early in my career. I found my first home in ALA in Rusa. That learning experience was invaluable for someone who was changing careers to become a librarian. I accepted the nomination for ALA president in an effort to give back to our association, which has had such a positive impact on my professional life. Our association is facing internal and external challenges that can only be overcome by strong leadership and collaboration. I believe I have the right set of skills and experience to lead our association forward at this moment. I bring proven leadership and a unique set of experiences in corporate, nonprofit, and library settings to help navigate the work ahead. I have strong leadership experience within ALA as a 2010 emerging leader, 3-term counselor at large, a member of the RUSA Board of Directors and ALA Executive Board. I have served on key committees, including the Committee on Diversity, Spectrum Scholar Selection Jury, and most recently, the Forward Together Working Group and Philanthropy Advisory Group. With the Executive Board, I worked to bring more accountability and transparency to our finances. With our pivot strategy, I'll work to restore financial stability by helping to develop new revenue streams and expand our individual donor base. Together, we must work on increasing member engagement, effective governance, and continuing our efforts to transform ALA into a more responsive, sustainable, and modern association. We as an organization should also strive for a more inclusive library community, which means continuing to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion at all levels of ALA, its leadership, and our profession. This should also include a strong commitment to accessibility. I have worked my entire career to advance EDI principles within ALA and in my community. With the increased strain on local budgets due to the pandemic, our advocacy efforts need to be foremost in our work. As libraries reopen, the safety, job security, and wellness of library workers needs to be at the top of our advocacy efforts. I have significant advocacy experience and have worked extensively with members of Congress. As Legislative Action Chair of the Rhode Island Library Association, I have fought for increased state funding for libraries and statewide adoption of the AASL standards for school librarians. At this moment, with a new Congress and a new administration, ALA must advocate for universal broadband, net neutrality, COVID relief funds for libraries, and the elimination of student debt for our struggling library workers. As your president, I'll work closely with the PPA office and our member advocates in this work. As your president, I will also engage with our new members to help them find their path in ALA. I will visit library schools across the country to meet with our student ALA members. I want to learn what inspires them and how we can make ALA more responsive to their needs, because ALA is the professions association. It should reflect all those who ensure its continued success. I believe in bringing people together to find common ground and actionable solutions. I have demonstrated experience in ALA and in my community working with varied groups to effect positive change. My decision to run for president was less about personal ambition and more about a sense of commitment and belief. A belief that I can help address the challenges we all face, all workers, all library workers in all libraries. I see a positive future for ALA that we can achieve together. I have a passion for public service that my work within our association has nurtured. I'll bring that commitment to you as your ALA president. I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I will now ask presidential candidate Stacey Aldridge to present her opening statement. Stacey.
Thank you, Wanda. Aloha, my name is Stacey Aldridge and I'm the State Librarian of Hawaii, and I'm truly honored to be a candidate for this year's ALA president with two brilliant leaders, Ed and Lessa. Ed, I just want to take a minute to congratulate you for winning. I think it's the second Jerry Klein Community Award. It's such an amazing honor. And Lessa, thank you so much for all the work you've done on SCO, thinking about with the committee, working on how do we think about the future of our organization. I felt very lucky to be with such an amazing group of candidates. You know, I was thinking about ALA and why is ALA important to me? And I do feel like I want to make sure I contribute back to this amazing organization for all that it has given me. But I really started to think about my first ALA, which was in 1997, and it was in San Francisco. And I was still a baby librarian. It was my first time going to exhibits and sessions, and it was the first time I had presented nationally on a project we had been working on in Maryland. The energy was amazing. I felt excited and lost, and all the feelings you can feel of going to an amazing conference where you get to see so many people who believe in the same things that you do, who are thinking about the same things that you are. I know for some of you, this is your first ALA, and welcome to the virtual conference center. You only have to have, the only comfy shoes you probably need this time are your slippers, but I'd like to transmit some energy to you all if this is your first conference, and hopefully at some point in the future, we'll all be able to awkwardly hug each other. You know, we're an amazingly creative, brilliant, eclectic, and responsive profession. When there's a mass shift in our communities, no matter what library community, we figure out how to adapt and serve. And I'm grateful to everyone who has had to adapt despite angst, fear, uncertainty, to make sure that our communities are connected and show why libraries are so important for the health of our nation, the health of our states, the health of our communities locally. The pandemic has been tragic, and it has accelerated changes in the way we work, use technology, eat, socialize, shop, and live, and many more things. It has also accelerated changes in innovation in technology. And there's going to be a great transition as we come out on the other side of COVID-19. Are we ready for that transition? Along with being a librarian, I've worked as a futurist, tracking trends and thinking with my colleagues inside and outside of library land about what they mean. What are the possible futures? Organizations that do intentional thinking about the future and playing with what could possibly be are usually the most successful. They're able to not only look at the trends, but be creative with what's possible and build the future, not just react to the future. What we have been doing across ALA has been great. I'm honored to be on the advisory group for the Center for the Future of Libraries, and I know many other divisions, committees, roundtables, and leadership, including Tracy, our executive director, are thinking about the future. But can we do it in a way that brings us all together, that brings the whole ecosystem together, so that everybody can see and have a conversation about the future? And can we do that in a way that brings everybody's stories? Because we're more powerful as an organization when we understand each other and everyone can be heard. You know, when I think about this future and I think about what we need to do, I'd like to invite you all to join me in a year of intentional future curiosity, thinking and building scenarios for the future of ALA, our profession, and our communities. Let's create focused opportunities to hear from innovators, from scientists, from anthropologists, from dreamers, from ecologists, economists, you name it, any other ist, about people, any kind of people who are developing the future, thinking about the future, or see a future that could be impacting our communities and our world. And we
1 minute left.
Thank you. We can do that through virtual and physical connections. Let's pool all of what we've learned together to create possible futures for the scenarios for the future and to build strategies for thriving. Let's work together to build our future. I hope that you'll give me an opportunity to bring and share my local, state, and national leadership experiences, future thinking, and aloha to work on the challenges that face us today, to build with each other a strong organization and lay the foundations for tomorrow. I thank you for your consideration. For President of the American Library Association. Aloha.
Thank you, Stacey. I will now ask presidential candidate Lesa Kanai Opua Pelea Lozada to present her opening statement. Lesa?
Thank you, Past President Brown, and mahalo nui loa to the nominating committee for their work on a strong slate of candidates and for the honor of allowing me to stand here as your candidate for ALA president. With over 14 years of member leader experience, including executive board member, counselor, and steering committee on organizational effectiveness, SCOE chair, I have demonstrated my passion and commitment to ALA and our core values by maintaining open dialogues and taking action on member ideas and feedback. In ALA and as past president and current executive director of APALA, the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association, I have worked to support library workers in libraries of all types and to listen, understand, and build bridges in the profession and our communities towards unity and justice. When I became SCOE chair 2.5 years ago, the hopeful passion I saw our members bring to ALA inspired me to take on the daunting task of evaluating our association. This passion came through as I heard from thousands about how we can rejuvenate ALA, building on our successes and strengths to ensure a future where our mission, learning and ensuring access to information for all is a reality. I stand here ready to build upon the foundational successes of past ALA members to lead with all of you. As with past transitions, our ability to face our challenges head on with an openness to change and a desire to include as many voices as possible to the process is what gets us through. Changing expectations for member engagement, financial instability, and the call to become a truly equitable institution are all areas that I intend to address as your next ALA president. Leading together for change, we can face these challenges head on and come out stronger together. I bring my whole self as a mixed race Native Hawaiian, as a children's librarian, and now middle manager to the position of ALA president, a role typically held by administrators. I see myself as an ALA president representing the hands-on work so many of our members do every day. ALA belongs to all of us, and I see my role as president as ensuring we feel we belong to this community and have spaces for connection. I will lead together with our members for an association and profession that is anti-racist and practices racial equity and inclusion in all decision-making. As a leader in ALA's commitment to diversity in many roles, including chair of the Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services Odalist Advisory Committee, and as a leader in APALA and the 2018 Joint Conference of Librarians of Color Steering Committee, I have demonstrated a track record of collaborative action and results. We will lead together to model organizational excellence and sustainability. I bring deep knowledge of ALA's financial issues and will leverage my experiences as past BARC and Planning and Budget Assembly member, and in fundraising and developing financial partnerships to work closely with our treasurer, members, and staff to work towards fiscal stability and restore trust and transparency. Together, we will commit to our core values through partnerships amplifying our ideals. Collaborations help us leverage our strengths in areas like intellectual freedom and supporting library workers, alongside organizations like the Freedom to Read Foundation, our affiliates, and our chapters, as well as through shared governance with the ALA Allied Professional Association. Together, we can bring the vast knowledge of our members and staff to create action through ALA's strong advocacy and legislative base, which is essential to our future. The work done to situate ALA at the forefront of the fight for information access and upholding democracy allows us space to grow and reimagine ourselves as an association that supports the challenges of our library workers and communities while celebrating the everyday joys that make libraries meaningful to all of us. I look forward to strengthening, celebrating, and leading together for change with each and every one of you. As I ask for your vote in March, I encourage all of you to make your voice heard and lead with me in our association every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lessa. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Ed. Now we will take questions from the audience. If you wish to ask the question, please type the question in the Q&A feature or raise your hand by utilizing the raise hand feature. When you are recognized, please state your name and institution before asking your question. Each question will be answered by all the candidates. We will do our best to answer all of the questions. However, if time does not permit, then we encourage you to connect with the candidate after this forum. Their information will be provided in the chat. So we have about 35 minutes, I think, or so.
Thank you, Past President Brown. We have a submitted question. It's actually two submitted questions that are similar and related that were pre-submitted. It is from ALA member Jennifer Kawai-Young and ALA member John Claxton, and we're going to combine their questions. They're very similar. With the most unprecedented year in modern history and a current one that seems very close to the one previously, what are your thoughts on moving forward in reestablishing library activity and support we may have lost over this past year? And how are you balancing these factors within your own organizations?
Our response order this time will be Ed, Stacy, and then Lessa. And then we'll rotate it next time. So we'll start with Ed.
Thanks for the question. You know, we're facing a difficult time coming out of this pandemic, and I think we have to rethink how all of our traditional library services are going to work as we are able to reopen. It's going to be challenging. I think ALA can play an important role in just telling the story of libraries of all types across the country that have worked through this pandemic, whether it was being open physically, doing curbside delivery systems, or doing virtual programming. I know my institution, within a week, my staff, my amazing team, started doing virtual programming, which we had never done before. And we did over 150 story times in like a span of like 2 or 3 months. And it was amazing to see. And I think that's what ALA's role could be. In my own institution, we were able to safely reopen back in June. So we've been open for more than 6 months. And it took a team effort to do that. We needed to have every member of our team participate in how we decided to reopen. So we had many meetings of our staff. I heard their concerns. They were part of the decision-making process in every way. And we actually opened, I remember we had scheduled an opening date, and there was a lot, that was still concerns from the staff. So we pushed it back for several more weeks before we reopened again. And I think that the lessons that we've learned, we can really talk about how we can make sure that library administrations understand that there is definite concern and fear from our frontline library workers, how we can address those to make sure that the work is spread out in an equitable and safe way.
Thanks. Stacy?
A very timely question. And in Hawaii, we have 51 branches on 6 islands. And, it's been a challenge because we have to balance all the information that's coming from varying sources of information around the health and safety of how we handle materials, how we interact with people. I think public libraries, we also have a health, a community health responsibility. So trying to balance the people who really want to come back into the library, but understanding that we really don't want people to be close together right now and being physically distanced. So in Hawaii, we've spent a lot of time planning and a lot of meetings and a lot of involvement by our staff. And we do our best to try to address the concerns that our staff have. And we have been very cautious about how we open and to how many people we open. So we do what we call library takeout service, which is like curbside. And then we also have wiki visits. So people can come in quickly in small numbers to pick up a book, use a copier, use a computer, and then leave. And as we look forward, I think for the association, some of the things that I think would be helpful would be continual connections among the libraries that are able to open, so they can talk story about what they've been able to do and how they implemented those changes. Continued discussion with the lead epidemiologists, or what do we know about the diseases now in terms of we're learning something new every day about how do we stay safe, how do we encourage our communities to be safe. So I think for ALA, creating more dialogue with the leaders and then the folks who are still learning and trying to figure out will be crucial as we move forward, and continuing to look at how do we make sure our staff are healthy, how do we make sure our patrons are healthy, and how do we make sure our communities are healthy. Thank you.
Lessa?
Thank you, Wanda. I agree with Ed and Stacy so far. I think that we're all on the same train. And I think that this is a really important time for us, to revisit what our partnerships look like, in our own institutions, as well as our partnerships as an association. Right now it's prime time to demonstrate how libraries have been there for our communities, regardless of whether your library is still completely closed or completely open. I know as an adult services assistant manager, the day that we closed, we all ran home and started figuring out virtual programming and worked nonstop to try to make sure that our communities had access to services. And these are the kinds of things that I think as an association, it's a perfect time to share. Whenever we come up, for re-upping our IMLS funding and speaking to legislators, really showing the outpouring of support that we have been able to provide during this time is going to garner us the support that we need moving forward. And I know in my own community, it's actually opened us up to whole new levels of support. I work for a special district library, so we're not directly attached to any one city or county government, and we don't necessarily have direct relationships with our city councils. And this has opened up our lines of communication to a whole new way that we never had before. And then as far as also preparing within my own institution, I live in Los Angeles, where we have had quite the surge and a minimum of ICU beds. And so our staff, like Ed and Stacy have both mentioned, we're scared. We're not sure what's going on. We have curbside service that we haven't closed, but we've been very careful each step along the way to prepare everyone for what that next step will look like, and to give ample time and resources and flexibility to our staff at all levels to be able to come as they feel comfortable and to gain that comfort level. I also think that it's a great time for programming. I think that we've shown libraries across the nation, regardless of library type, a creativity in reaching out to communities who have virtual access and who don't have virtual access. And watching how that plays out also in our rural and small communities, I think that also points to the importance of universal broadband and digital equity and what that looks like. So those are some things that I think are going to be really important in reestablishing what our relationships look like in the forward, both on local level and our national level.
Thank you. Holly, please read the next question in the Q&A, or a question that was submitted in advance.
Yes, we have a question in the Q&A from Alana Aiko Moore. At this place and time in history, when equity and inclusion work is more important than ever, what does ALA as an anti-racist organization look like to each of you?
Okay, this time we'll start with Stacy, then Lessa, and then Ed. Stacy.
It's an important question. Thank you. If we're doing what we need to do, if we believe in the values of everybody's voice is important and everybody should be heard, then our organization looks like that, where we hear everybody's voices, we can understand each other's voices. I think that there are times when there are people who don't feel like their voices are being heard, and we need to be able to hear that, and we need to be able to acknowledge it, and we need to be able to move forward. And so as I look at ALA and how we move forward and how we look at what does that organization look like, it looks like an organization that is open, where our hearts are empty when we listen and we try to understand each other and we try to work together to continue to create an organization where everyone feels like they are in the same place and everyone feels like they belong. Thank you.
Lessa.
Thank you, Wanda. And thank you, Alana, for that question. Being a truly anti-racist institution is so inspirational, aspirational, I should say, also inspirational, but aspirational, because I think that we have a lot of work to get there. We've done a lot of work over the years. We've come a long way since segregation at conferences and in libraries. But what that looks like, what true anti-racism looks like to me in ALA is welcoming all voices at the table. I think right now we're kind of in a space where we are reliant still upon intentional representation, making sure, that we're kind of filling in slots. And to me, what an anti-racist institution looks like is where we don't have to sit there and be like, do we have a person of color from each of the areas? Do we have, somebody representing accessibility? Do we have someone representing our small and rural libraries? We're already there. And we're all in there together, and we're all doing the work together, and we're all able to have the tough conversations that we have to have. Even as we become an anti-racist institution, we're still going to have to talk about what our identities mean to us and how those play out in our workplaces. And I see that translating also into our everyday workspaces, where oftentimes, as people of color, we may be the only person of color in that institution. And so really getting our libraries to support library workers and to support our communities in the ways that they need them to, and to be able to approach them with the right resources. So I hope that we can build upon the work of our EDI task forces in the past and our Spectrum Scholarship, and really become that institution that we crave and that we need and that I know we can become.
Ed.
Thank you for the question. I completely agree with everything that Lessa and Stacy have said. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done over the last few years on the executive board to acknowledge some of the racist history in our association. But I still think there's a lot of work to do. We need to be welcoming to all voices in our profession and our association. But I think that ALA needs to be an example because we talk a lot about our libraries across the country need to be representative of and reflect our communities, but we need to make sure that we're doing that in ALA, not just in our members and our leadership, but in our staff as well. And I think that we're definitely in that point. We're still in that intentional stage that Les has mentioned. And I hope that we can at some point get to the point where we are working all together, like Les had just mentioned, as one group without having to intentionally think of different types of representation and equity across the association.
Thank you. Holly, please read the next question in the Q&A or a question that was submitted in advance.
Yes, this question is from Trevor A. Dawes, ALA Life member. Earlier today, ALA Executive Director said in her report to the membership that a part of the pivot plan is to increase membership. As the principal face of ALA, what would you, as president, do to help with this specific goal of increasing membership?
Okay, this time we'll do Lessa, Ed, and then Stacy.
As we all know, membership is the foundation of our association. For without membership, we have no association. And so I've been really invigorated by conversations that I've heard from the membership committee about what our increasing membership looks like. As Trevor, you very rightly point out, we are declining in membership overall, but we are increasing in areas like student membership. And so what that means for us is we're bringing in new voices, and we have to not only bring them in, but we have to retain them. We have to give them reasons to stay. And so I hope that I would be able to share all of the reasons that I stay within ALA and all of the reasons that I think having a membership in ALA is such a strong place for us to position us in libraries nationwide, for our advocacy, for our divisions, for our roundtables, for all of the places that we can come to community. But what I would also do to help increase membership is broaden ourselves beyond our library workers. It's great that we want to get all of our library workers and all of our library students on board, but we have such a wealth of library supporters out there. Every single patron that comes into our library is a library lover and could potentially be an ALA member. For we are here for everyone, not just those who work in it. We're here for everyone who believes in information access to all. And I think that by really reaching out to those different types of communities, I think that we can work to grow our association together.
Ed?
Thanks for the question, Trevor. As I said earlier in my opening remarks, I believe student members are, again, the future of the association. And we need to reach out to them and hear what their aspirations are, what their inspirations are, how we can bring them into the association, and then again, transfer and retain their memberships from student memberships into being regular members. And I plan as president to visit library schools around the country to do that. Over the last few months, I've had the opportunity to speak to library students across the country. I've had about 4 different stops that I've spoken to library students about advocacy, and I've been hearing more and more about what they want out of the association. And I think that's really important for our future. One of the other things I would do is look at how ALA can be more supportive of library workers, not just libraries, not just professional librarians, but frontline library workers. Especially during this pandemic, we've heard a lot about how library workers are being forced to do things that aren't safe, that aren't equitable. How can ALA be a voice for those library workers, and hopefully bring them in as members and hear what they have to say and bring those concerns into ALA? So I think those are 2 of the biggest things I would do to try to increase our membership.
Thank you, Ed. Stacy?
I completely agree with Lessa and Ed. I think also thinking about how do we work closely with the state associations, the value of being a part of a state association, but also being a part of the national organization that brings us all together. I think we all, if we're all in this together and this is our organization, then we all should probably think about each finding at least one person that we know who would like to become a member of ALA and try to bring them in as a member. I know that we were at 56,000 members and we're now down to 53,000 members. So we know there are many more people out there who we want them to be a part of the organization. We want to be stronger by having them as a part of the organization. So how do we lessen the barriers for people to join? And then once people do get in, how do we make a clear path for how they can get involved and feel like a part of the organization? I think are going to be very important. When I was president of ASCLA, I had the opportunity to go to Chicago and go through the orientation. And the one thing that was daunting was the organizational chart. I honestly couldn't figure out how things worked. And I thought, okay, now I know why I've always been a little confused as a member, because I don't know where I fit. And so I think that we'll have more membership if it's easier for people to figure out where they can fit and where they can be a part of the organization. And so I think in looking at our structure, if we can do that, and if we all can take some personal responsibility for trying to help our colleagues become members, I think we can increase our membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Raymond, are there any hands raised?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Holly, please read the next question in the Q&A.
Yes, this question is from Leslie Diana Jones. Your presidency may come during or shortly thereafter members voting yes or no to the Forward Together initiative. If no changes happen as a result of this many years initiative, how will you proceed in transforming ALA to meet future challenges?
And this order will be Ed, Stacy, and then Lessa. Ed?
Thanks, Leslie Diana, for the question. So I've recently been on the Forward Together working group, and I want to start answering by saying that governance in ALA is not the only pathway to engagement in ALA. So I think that whether some of the Forward Together recommendations actually pass or not, we still need to do much more work to have engagement with our members and find people their pathways into ALA, because it isn't all about governance. But having said that, I think that if nothing comes of all the work that we've done as a working group, like the amazing work that Lessa led and SCOE, and I know there's a new group being formed, I still think there are ways to make our governance more effective. I know we currently have the operating agreement working group doing some of their work, but there's ways to make our current governance within ALA Council more effective. By meeting more often throughout the year. We've proven in this last pandemic year that council can work fairly effectively in a virtual setting. So perhaps not having the requirement to actually be in a meeting in person, which also I think is a barrier for a lot of members to want to participate. If you can meet more often throughout the year, you can be nimble. And over this last year, the executive boards had to release a lot of different statements because there was a lot going on. That really could and should be the job of council, if council could meet more often and have more vigorous debate throughout the year in a virtual setting. Then those statements could come from our policymaking body and not have to come from the executive board if it happens in an off cycle. So I think that is something that we could look at. Also, those recommendations in the working group to have fewer committees. There was a little bit of feedback that we got saying some of those, the recommended committees are too few, but we have too many now. So I think, regardless of what happens with the recommendations and the votes, looking at all the current committees to make sure that they're all still relevant, and we have an effective process for sunsetting committees we no longer need, but also bringing forward committees and working groups that we do need. So I think there's plenty of ways we can make ALA more effective in governance, and again, having to do more work for member engagement if the Forward Together recommendations do not come to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Stacy?
Thank you. It's a very important question. Most organizations are doing the very same thing that ALA is doing right now, thinking about how to build nimble organizations that can support members, and how to sustain membership, and how to sustain an organization that brings people together around our common themes, our common missions, our common values. I think it is a challenge if nothing happens out of the report A lot of work has gone into that report, a lot of thought, a lot of people were engaged. And Lessa is really familiar with this. She can tell you the whole, the whole story. I think the challenge for us is trying to address the concerns that people have with such change. And in the meetings that we had yesterday, I was lucky to speak with a few people. And I think the main concern is with some of these changes, with such a large organization, how do we make sure that people's voices are still heard, that there's still an opportunity to participate, and but we can still be nimble. And I think the work of Future Forward is vital. And I'm hoping that even if we don't make all the recommendations, that we at least start to make some shifts, because I think the future of our organization is going to be dependent on building this nimbleness that also creates connections in new ways. And I think those changes can be scary, but they can also be good. And again, I want to thank Lessa and the committee who worked on Future Forward, because it was a lot of work. And I think a lot of heart has gone into that, thinking about how we can be a better organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Lessa?
Thank you, Wanda. Just on if nothing changes, I would definitely cry. But the good news is that we are already seeing changes with or without votes that happen on behalf of Forward Together. You know, there were the thousands of members we spoke to. There were also the 20+ members on the SCOE group, and another almost 20 people on the Forward Together working group, and now the 25 people that are on the Forward Together resolutions committee that will be bringing these things forward. And so by bringing it to something that's more tangible, I'm still really hopeful that we're going to pass some of it. Did we ever think we would pass all of it? Probably not, right? Because the point, I think, ultimately of it was to engage members and begin the process of consistently evaluating our association and having these conversations on a regular basis, not just once every 20 or 30 years or when things go wrong. And so I've been really invigorated by seeing things that have already started happening. You know, the tough conversations, some of them did start before SCOE started, but CORE, for instance, of Lita and Lama and Alex coming together and seeing where the commonalities are and where we can create efficiencies, while also building a strong network within one another. And also, I've been really invigorated by the roundtables starting their own evaluation group so that they can see where they also can align and make the member experience easier. So whatever happens as far as our, you know, council votes and member votes with Forward Together, I think that we've started the most important process, which is conversation, true member engagement, and change in all aspects of our association.
Thank you, Lessa. I think we have time for one more question. So Holly, do we have one more question?
Yes, we do have one more question. These are actually two pre-submitted questions that are similar, so I'm going to combine. It's a question submitted from member Carrie Banks and Alice Hagemeyer. Specifically, how do you see people with disabilities fitting into ALA's EDI framework? And within the ALA structure, we need to focus on deaf culture and its various aspects, specifically from Alice Hagemeyer. However, we do not have many ALA members, library administrators as our national advocates on behalf of both the deaf communities and the library communities. In your position as future ALA president, we want to hear from you. How will you address that and other peoples with disabilities in the ALA EDI framework?
Thank you, Holly. Stacy, then Lessa, then Ed.
Vital that everyone feels like they're a part of the organization. And have we listened enough to the voices, to the thoughts, the words of our communities that are challenged? And I don't know that we have. So I would be more interested in taking time and listening and hearing about what are the things that are of concern within our disabled communities, and what are the ways that we could make ALA a better organization, an organization that can hear the voice and that can be thoughtful about the way we think about our programs, about the way we ensure whether or not things are accessible with closed captioning if we're doing video. What are the ways that we can better support the community? And to me, it has to start with listening and figuring out the best way that we can support you all and creating the space for everyone. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted, Lessa.
Thank you, Wanda. It's essential. You know, when we talk about equity within our association, we mean equity of all types. And this includes our accessibility and our disability community, including deaf culture. And I think that one of the things that make me hopeful in this particular area of equity is, despite, you know, ASCLA being relocated to different areas of the association, is the accessibility officer that is coming to the ODLOS office. And that is something that I think is going to help spread it into every aspect of our association and into every aspect, because this isn't just one office's work, right? This is all of our work to be informed and to make those connections. And one of the things that I think we also need to revisit, and I know Ed has been pushing the executive board to do this, is the accessibility task force report. You know, we had a group who did an in-depth analysis for us and made recommendations, and we need to consistently revisit those recommendations, just like we need to consistently revisit our EDI task force's recommendations to make sure that we're continuing to meet our goals and that we're continuing to grow beyond those goals as well and create new ones for us once we've reached those, because these processes are never ending and there's always room to learn. So I look forward to really making equity a strong focus for all of us and ingraining it into every aspect of the work we do, not just in ALA, but in our communities and at home as well.
Thank you, Leslie. Ed?
Carrie and Alice, thanks for the question. I mentioned accessibility earlier, and Lessa is right. We did have a report about accessibility in ALA that was from 2017, and my perspective, I as the executive board liaison to ASGLA, I would hear a lot about the concerns of their members in this area, and I have been pushing to try to get that addressed. We were able to find, I was disappointed in the dissolution of ASGLA, but we were able to find a new home for the accessibility assembly within ODLOS. So the idea of having an accessibility officer is a really good step forward. But this is all of our work. I think, it's not just ODLOS's work or the accessibility assembly. I think all members of the association need to be aware that to make an equitable association for everyone, we need to look at our disabled members and the deaf culture, which I actually, I am still learning. So as president, besides helping with those efforts, I would want to bring together our members to have conversations so I can be educated, so I can learn about exactly what we need to do as an association to address these concerns, to make sure that everyone can get out of ALA what they need, and that it's an accessible and equitable organization moving forward. So thank you again for the question.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, I think we're gonna try to squeeze one more question in. Do we have another question, Holly or Raymond? Hand raised.
We do have another question.
Okay.
This question, we have two similar questions, in fact, from Diane Chen and Casey Boyd. With the goals of increasing membership and the potential for changing how leadership looks within ALA, how will you work to ensure that school librarian voices are heard and that school librarians are included in more opportunities throughout ALA? Particularly with changes in Midwinter event in the future, how will you highlight youth leadership?
Okay, this time we're gonna go Lessa and then Ed and then Stacy. So Lessa.
Thank you, Wanda. I think that in terms of school and youth librarianship in particular, there are a lot of barriers to participation for us, right? For youth librarians, I know firsthand experience, summer reading program starts the same week as annual conference, right? For school librarians, a lot of our meetings that happen on a governance and a committee level happen during a school day. And so unless we're able to hold those meetings between, in your evening and your off hours, it makes it really difficult, I think, for us to make sure those voices are heard. And so what I really encourage us to do is think about what our engagement looks like, what our requirements for committee participation looks like, and also for us to all really be flexible, about when we're planning these things. And, we want to do, a lot of us do have the ability and the privilege to do these things on work hours, but for those that don't, making those accommodations to make sure that we have all those voices at the table. And so I really look forward to working more with AASL in particular about learning how we can continue to reduce these barriers throughout the association and starting to implement those things, and also inviting them whenever we can. Inviting them to everything, but, like I talked about earlier, we're in a place of intentional representation. And so we need to be intentional about what that looks like for all types of library workers at all levels, and especially for our school librarians. And eventually, hopefully getting to a place where our school librarians also, we can advocate with their directors and their administrators to be able to help them see the importance of association work on their day-to-day job to allow them that time.
Okay. Thank you, Lessa. Ed?
Diane and Casey, thanks for the question. Lessa makes a great point as far as when those meetings happen. I've heard that from a lot of my own youth services librarians in my library and school librarians that I know. And I think that that's a huge barrier that we need to address. Maybe more virtual participation, being more aware of when we hold those meetings is really important. And the intentionality of having school librarian representation in our governance on the executive board, I also believe is very important. I know over the last several years, I've learned a lot from school librarians here in Rhode Island and here in my home city of Cranston. I mentioned earlier that I've been working with school librarians in Rhode Island to try to get the ASL standards for school librarians approved statewide, and to try to require school librarians in every school in the state. I actually introduced a bill in our state legislature that did that. The bill didn't pass, but it actually gave us the opportunity to work with our Department of Education, which they were very resistant to talking to us in the past. When this bill was introduced, they're like, oh, now we have to pay attention to school librarians because they're actually getting some support in the General Assembly of the state. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, we would have had the ASL standards approved statewide already. And we're hopeful that by the next school year in September, that's going to be done. We've built an amazing partnership in my city with our school librarians. We actually work with them and go into the schools multiple times a year. We have meetings with the school librarians, their coordinators, and I actually meet with them and the superintendent once a year to set an agenda for what we're going to do, student partnerships in our schools. And that's been a really an intentional but really important partnership for us. And we've had an effort several years ago to go find free in our community and get a library card in the hands of every student in our city. And we have 10,000 students in the district. We have 8,500 students with library cards now, and our superintendent and our mayor and our schools all partnered with that effort, and we were able to make that happen. And it's really important that, at ALA and in the governance of ALA, that we learn from our school librarian colleagues and listen to what their concerns are, which are different from what our concerns are at public libraries. And I wanted in my presidential year, make sure that we have those conversations and we put school librarians on the forefront. Just like I mentioned about library workers, I think school librarians are facing some of the same challenges that other librarians are facing as far as their schools being closed, not being able to do all the work they need to do, not being able to reach out to their students, and we need to do that work as well.
Thank you, Ed. Stacy?
I think Lessa and Ed have really defined the challenges very well. I think part of our challenge as an organization is we all come from a space in our ecosystem. And I just want to support the One Voice Building Strong Library Ecosystem structure that was built by the State Ecosystem Task Force Committee on Library Advocacy. We tend to think about ourselves in silos, but how do we think about the thing that actually is what brings us together, which are the people we serve? And there's an ecosystem of people that we serve that crosses over, and we are constantly trying to figure out ways to help support and make it easier for our users to use all of the resources that we have, no matter what kind of library. When I think about school librarians, it's difficult. And in schools, if their budgets are cracked, so librarian positions are sometimes the first to go, or they keep a teacher's position and they let go of the librarian. And I think along with thinking about the ecosystem of how we all work together and how we touch the people we serve, and having conversations together about that, how do we also look at supporting in our communities the value of school libraries and why they are so important to the growth and the success of our students as they move forward. I think about a future that we can't even predict right now. And I think about what is the one thing students are going to need to be able to do, and they're going to need to be able to navigate a flush and tide of information and ideas and concepts, and to be able to critically think. So we believe that about everyone, but how do we support each other more strategically? And how do we look at our ecosystem as connected? Sometimes we're in our own silo, but how do we start having sessions where we're talking about those connections and how we can more adequately support our schools and our school librarians, and also make time so that it's possible for them to participate, because there's some simple barriers that I think are achievable to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Our time for questions is now over. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. We will begin with presidential candidate Lesa Kanai Palayo Lozada. Lesa. Then we will go to Stacy and then Ed. Lesa.
Thank you, Wanda. In 2010, when I served on a Paulus committee to create Talk Story, a family literacy program in conjunction with ALA President Camilla O'Leary's presidential initiatives, I had little notion of how ingrained ALA would become as part of the work I am most passionate about in libraries. That single volunteer opportunity changed what I had originally envisioned the course of my career to be, from one focused on public libraries only to a career that advocates for the entire ecosystem of libraries, including all types, library lovers and supporters, and library workers at all levels across the nation. There is so much that ALA gives each of us at different points in our membership life cycle, just as libraries give us so much at different points in our lives. And part of both, at least for me, is the community of ALA. Our commitment to one another, regardless of the type of library we work in or support, centers us around uplifting communities and upholding democracy. It is a commitment that gives us the freedom to explore and learn, a commitment to serve and ensure that all have access to information and intellectual freedom, and a true commitment to diversity of all types. A commitment that is actualized by leading together for change and continuous improvement, not just in difficult times, but even in the good times. These commitments to me are commitments for your ALA president to uphold, continue, and build upon to create a strong future for our association, libraries, and library workers. I am thankful for the support of my family, the Palos Verdes Library District, and ALA members, and I am honored to stand as your candidate for ALA president. I ask for your vote to lead together with me to ensure our association is what we need it to be, not just today, but for the future of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesa. I now call upon presidential candidate Stacy Aldridge to present her closing statement. Stacy.
Thank you, Wanda. Thank you, Wanda, for moderating us today. And I'd like to thank the ALA staff who have been wonderful in getting us prepared for this first virtual candidacy session. It's been amazing, and I'm so grateful to them. ALA is an important organization. It's our place, it's our community. It's the space that brings us together around our common values, our common ideas, and sometimes not common. We don't always have to agree, but I do think there are lots of things that we do agree upon, no matter what kind of library organization that you belong to, no matter where you sit in your library organization, you find value in the work that you're doing in serving your community. And ALA is here to support you. As I think about the future, I think we really do need to take a solid look at what the future is going to be. What will it look like? If you want to join me in a year of intentional future thinking, future thought forward, I encourage you to consider voting for me this year and work together so that we can build our future together. I encourage you to, over the next couple of weeks, I have some future podcasts. I'm going to be interviewing people who are doing interesting projects. The next podcast is going to be about robots. The first one is about networking and thinking about Elon Musk and the satellites that are creating new connectivity. And it's the Future Curious Librarian, and you can find it at Spotify or anchor.fm. And I hope we can continue this conversation, whatever happens. You've got a great slate of candidates. I would vote for Ed and Lessa too. We have a great slate. We have a wonderful organization. And I thank all of you for taking the time to listen to us and to think about the future of our organization. And respectfully request your vote for ALA candidate for ALA president. So thank you very much. Aloha and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Stacy. I now call upon presidential candidate Ed Garsha to present his closing statement. Ed?
Thank you, Madam Past President, and thanks to the ALA staff for getting us ready. Again, Lessa and Stacy, thank you for standing for election. I wish we could have done this in person and had this experience together, and hopefully we'll have a chance to see each other soon. So I talked a little bit about my background, and I have to say I went through a long odyssey before I was able to find my true path in life as a librarian. I love libraries, and I want to act in service of our profession, our calling that has given me so much. I want to give new librarians the same help in finding their path in ALA that I received 15 years ago. Our LIS students and recent graduates are the future of our profession, and I want to embrace their passion and inspiration and bring their spirit of service into our association. I also want to value the experience and contributions of our longstanding members and the role they still have to play. As your ALA president, I am ready to lead us forward to build a more equitable and sustainable association, to celebrate our achievements and the hard work of all library workers, and to work together for our continued success. I am honored to stand for election for your ALA president. My name is Ed Garsha, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. This concludes the 2021 ALA Virtual Midwinter Presidential Candidates Forum. It has been my pleasure to moderate this forum. I would like to thank all of our candidates and for all of you who came to hear them. To learn more about the candidates, please visit their presidential pages. I would also like to strongly encourage you to vote this spring and to urge your fellow members to vote as well. Electronic balloting will begin on March 8th of 2021. Polls will close on April 7th. We will know the results of the election on April 14th. Renew your membership by January 31st, 2021 to ensure that you receive your ballot for the 2021 ALA election. Again, thank you for attending the forum. Enjoy the remainder of the conference. Right.